We've been talking a lot about COVID vaccines, but what about childhood vaccines? Some lawmakers want to get rid of the religious exemption and not allow students in Connecticut to attend public schools unless they are vaccinated. It's become a very heated issue. Joining us this morning, Representative Jonathan Steinberg, the chair of the Public Health Committee, and House Minority Leader Vinnie Candelora. They have different views on what Connecticut should do. Thank you for joining us on Face the State.
Thank you for having us.
Jonathan, I want to start with you because this is really in your wheelhouse. It has been. I know you've had hearings on it. What's happening now with this legislation?
Well, we're about to embark on a really long hearing, which will probably actually be longer than last year's hearing. Representative Candelora, I'm sure, remembers it well. He was on the Public Health Committee when we had it last year. We passed this bill out of committee. It was a bill ready to be voted on the floor before the pandemic shut down the Capitol. And it's roughly the same bill again this year. We made a slight adjustment to the grandfathering clause, really focusing on the elementary schools where the data suggests that the troubling trend is really at its worst. But our focus is less on the religious exemption and more on really strengthening and clarifying the medical exemption. There are people who have, I think, legitimately been very concerned that they've been unable to obtain a medical exemption. So we're really focusing on making it very clear, getting physicians in a situation where they're not only well educated, but they're prepared to be engaged. We have a companion bill that would reimburse via insurance for an extended consultation between practitioners and families to discuss their concerns about vaccines. But this is a bill that we've heard hours and hours of testimony on before, and we're going to go through it again this year.
Right. I know the speaker supports it. Representative Candelora, Representative Steinberg mentioned something overall as a state, we have high vaccination rates, but we have seen several schools where they have gone below the guidelines. Does that concern you? And do you think that this legislation is good or bad?
Yeah, I think the timing of it is tough right now. I do think we have issues in certain pockets, areas of schools, but we need to unpeel the data. There are non-compliance issues. So we have children in school that have not filled out any application, whether it be an exemption or their vaccination schedule. So understanding that data and trying to get people into compliance is an important piece of the legislation. Our concern is denying children the right to a public education is something we all need to avoid. And to that extent, I think this legislation really needs to address that issue. We've seen the impacts of distance learning and isolation on children over the past year, and I don't think we want a policy that will just exacerbate that.
Representative Steinberg, do you think that students really and parents have a choice? I mean, I've never seen so many people at the Capitol. I remember there were some 5,000 who came out. It was almost like a 24-hour hearing. But these students and their parents do have a choice.
Well, certainly you're correct. They've been very passionate on this issue. Unfortunately, I think some of them have been subject to some very slick misinformation campaigns that have contributed to vaccine hesitancy. I would have hoped after a year of living with a pandemic, people would be seeing the value of vaccines and how important they are to protect the public health. Unfortunately, some people continue to only receive their information from certain information sites that have led to misinformation and have led to those using the religious exemption for other reasons that are not explicitly about their religious objections. And that has really led to the problem we're facing right now.
Representative Candelora, do you think that this will cause a huge backlash, or do you think that some Republicans will go along with this? Are you looking for some type of an amendment, or can there not be?
Well, I think one of the things that's clear that came out of the hearings last year is that a lot of people are exercising the religious exemption because the medical exemption is falling short of protecting them. There are autoimmune children that cannot get a medical exemption and have to exercise that exemption. And it is about education, understanding, and parental choice. So it's balancing those needs. I think my concern is that this bill at this given time, not knowing where all our students are right now, is going to be very difficult to administer but I hope we go into a better direction of providing the education piece and not use a hammer on our children.
We only have about a minute and a half left in this segment. If you were to make closing arguments, Representative Steinberg, what would you say is the pressing issue and why we should get rid of this exemption?
I do believe parents have a legitimate concern about their ability to obtain a medical exemption, and that's really what we focused on. Representative Candelora was part of a working group we put together 2 years ago to really try to understand this and talk to all the interested parties. I believe this bill reflects the best of what we can do as a state to both make sure people have access to a medical exemption and to tamp down on those who are not vaccinating their kids and putting other children at risk. And this is really what it's about.
Representative Candelora?
Yeah, I think that we need to make sure that we are not denying children an education. It's so important. Connecticut is one of the #1 states in the country. We pride ourselves on a great education system. And so it's balancing the needs of our communities with the ability of these children to be able to be educated. And I think that that's going to be part of the discussion. At what point in time do we allow these children, especially the younger generations, to get access to public schools?
This is such a heated, passionate issue, and we will keep you up to date on what happens. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the State this morning.